Hi, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. We're going to talk a little bit about the flipped classroom and kind of general concepts for flipping the classroom. And thank you for joining us today. I want to just start by saying that it's a pleasure and an honor to participate and be a part of groups that are attempting to flip the classroom. I want to make myself available if you have questions on how to implement the process, and do a brief introduction of myself so that you know who I am and what my background is. But this is my Google Voice number, my cell number. It goes directly to my cell. Some people are more comfortable texting messages and asking questions in real time, but feel free to send a text and ask a question. That's also my email address. I am the director of the Pre-Hospital Care Research Forum at UCLA. That's my full-time gig, if you will. But I still practice as a paramedic at Allina Health EMS, and am a senior lecturer, adjunct for Monash University, where I'm a PhD candidate. So, God willing, I will finish that PhD and hopefully get that finished. So I have a master's in experiential education, and that's kind of what brought me to the flipped classroom concept mostly. And since approximately 2008, I've been teaching classes in this manner. So these are flipped classroom style courses, and I'm excited to share that methodology with you so that you can kind of see what that's all about. I do always declare my conflicts and want to make sure that I'm not selling you anything. So the concepts of flipped classrooms are universal and aren't tied to any particular product. You can consider me conflicted. I helped start FISDAP, and um, I'm the editor for the Spanish version of EMS World and do a lot with EMS World in general, and author for Jones and Bartlett. I have been an author for McGraw-Hill. So all these people in some way, shape, or form contributed to my bottom line in some way, and a little or a lot, it doesn't matter. I want to just declare the conflict. I also want to particularly say that we are in the midst of doing a very cool flipped classroom model with many different schools involved. It's a UCLA flipped classroom, and I can't wait to share some of those ideas with you. So particularly in this case, Jones and Bartlett and FISDAP have been supporting that effort, and I want to make sure that I say that up front. I also wear many hats, and so I work with the Committee on Accreditation, and have done a lot of work with the National Registry, the National Association of EMTs, and AMSE, a new organization called the International Paramedic Registry. So none of what I'm going to present is necessarily their ideas, and I just want to make sure that I don't misrepresent those organizations. I want to direct people to read this article. It came out on the cover of EMS World in May 2017, and it's titled Beyond Regurgitation. Beyond education regurgitation. So it's about competency. It's about achieving 100% success rates on national accrediting exams, but it's got a philosophy of flipping the classroom embedded in that article. So suggest that you take a look at that. I also would like to direct you to look at the Quest for Competence article in September 2008, also in EMS World. This was a compilation of different articles that were meta-analyses on the measurement of professional competence, which is actually the subject of my PhD. So please take a look at those. I think the hardest thing to do in all of our work as paramedic educators is change. So I want you to consider this concept that changing the way we teach is going to be very hard for us. We're agents of change, however. In fact, students arrive at the classroom with, one set of maybe brain matter or knowledge, if you will, and we're in the brokerage or the business of changing that brain. So when they arrive, we are agents of change. We encourage people to study and give them new skills and new knowledge. And sometimes if you think of that for yourself, that's a little bit harder. We're kind of used to the way in which we teach and do things, and we don't like change ourselves. So I'm going to ask you to please keep an open mind and think that maybe the way that we used to teach or the way that we were taught is not necessarily the most effective way. And I'm going to show you some research to help bring that together. Let me show you a couple of videos here that I find very interesting. I just need to switch my audio so that you can hear this video clip.
There has never been a bigger force for change than technology. It changes absolutely everything about the way we live, the way we get around, the way we eat, even the way we talk to each other.
Were you able to hear that audio?
Yes, we could hear it. We can see the video too.
You could hear the audio? Okay.
Uh-huh.
Sorry, I just needed to double check that. Okay.
Yeah, no problem.
Let me keep going then. I'm just going to give you one more video clip here to kind of set the stage.
Yeah, it's good. Probably.
I hope that was helpful. I'm wanting to keep moving with the presentation, but wanted to frame the current state of affairs. I think we are thinking of classrooms in a completely different way, and asking students in this generation to sit and be quiet while we express or give a bunch of information that they already have access to through a whole bunch of different channels. Information, I think, at this point is available in so many different ways that it brings to mind a question about whether or not we should be, the instructor should be the one that actually gives the information, or can the student elect which channel they receive the information from? Maybe it's a trusted friend that has the right information. Maybe it's a supervisor at work. Maybe it's a medical director. Maybe it's their textbook. Maybe it's a video. And who cares how they got that information, as long as they know the information, they have it, they can use it. Are we no longer brokers of that information? Everything I'm going to try and present to you is based on evidence, and so I'm, as much as possible, not going to give you, I'll give you my philosophies, but I'm going to try and bring in as much of the research as I can. And I think I'm going to start with that concept of accountability. I think we've slipped into a mode where students come to class and we assign a reading chapter, and students don't read the chapter. And we think that's just kind of normal now. We don't hold them accountable for it. It's not part of their grade to ensure that they actually did their reading. Many times we just sort of assume we're teaching classes, at least in the paramedic ranks, where they're meeting for 8 hours a day and they have to come back the next day, so there's no time for them to read a textbook. And we've little by little slipped into a mode where accountability is just not present. And it's not just not present for the student, it's not present for us. So we can talk a lot, and hearing the sound of your own voice may sound great. You think you're giving the world's best lecture, but retention isn't exactly, and we'll look at some statistics here in a minute, what we're efficient at. So truly, if you think of how students experience a classroom, imagine your first day of class, when you actually assign the chapter, and you will maybe get a percentage, maybe say, for example, 10 to 15 to 20% of your students actually read the book. So they arrive to class and they're prepared. Let's just give them the benefit of the doubt. They really know the material that was presented in the book. And what normally happens in a classroom today is that they're met with a lecture. And usually that lecture includes sitting passively, listening to that instructor's perspective or summary of that particular subject or the key points of that, which would seem like a good idea at face value, but most of these instructors are using what? Probably PowerPoint. And probably that PowerPoint came from the manufacturer of the textbook, the publisher. And little by little, what you're doing is summarizing the book in the same order in which it appeared in the book, with no new images or no new experiences. And I want you to think about exactly what you really taught the student, because the student did what you asked, the ones that actually did the reading, and then they arrived in class and got the same information, only summarized by an expert and in a concise way and kind of limited to a time where they were supposed to be in class anyway. So the real lesson you taught the students is, don't read the book. don't acquire information outside of the classroom, because learning is only going to happen in the classroom, and the expert will summarize this information for you and will do it in such a way that you can actually see that it's the same thing that's in the book. And we've fallen into a pattern where if the instructor didn't say it, then it's not even fair to put on a test because it wasn't covered in class. So it wasn't important enough that it should be on the test. So we need to break that cycle. And just here's some quick statistics about students and how much a learner would remember. And they'll remember 10% of what's read, 20% of what's heard, 30% of what's seen, 50% of what is heard and seen, finally 70% of what's read, and 90% of what's said and done. So what's fascinating to me is this concept of just sitting in a classroom, wasting 80% of our time with a passive event in which the student is just receiving information but not retaining that information. And then EMS instructors are really upset that we don't have enough time to teach all the material that's in a course. So we have to change that and make learning more active and make learning more engaging, so that it's not just about the spoken word in the classroom, engaging them in saying and doing activities that will cement the learning and be much more efficient about the way we process. So here's another graphic of that same statistic. And this verbal learning concept around words is something that we're in EMS in love with. In fact, we make them memorize checklists that are supposedly National Registry style exam checklists. And we have these hearing the words, regurgitating the words, but in fact, there's not a lot of movement attached to it, not a lot of activity attached to it. And then little by little, the action is lost, and the words are more important. So we need to get past this verbal diarrhea, both from the instructor and the student, and get into more of the activity level. And we're going to show you how to do that. So it is moving away from traditional styles of learning, and that's scary for some instructors. I know that the first time Sherm Severson did this in North Dakota, he flipped his classroom, and the students would come to class and they'd participate in scenarios. And so the students, what do you think? Did they love that? They loved it. They had a great time. They were coming to work and they were experiencing a whole bunch of scenarios. And in the meantime, the instructors were the ones, the assistant instructors were the ones who were just going, I just don't know how to deal with this. We're supposed to tell them the information. Then we're supposed to demonstrate these things one by one. And Sherm was saying, but we already did that. They already got that part of the learning. So when they're here, do scenarios. Of course, everybody's going to say, well, how did they do in the National Registry then? And the answer is 100% pass first attempt. Why? Because if they could do it in a scenario, when it came time to test them for that individual skill, on the practical, they did fine. And in the written, we know from experience and research that the more scenario participation, the more experiential learning, the more internship time, the more time on an ambulance, the more the student will succeed on that written exam. So all of those experiences that help them think critically, decide what's first, what's second, all of them will help them integrate that. And we keep getting stuck in a loop where we think memorizing the skill sheet is what's needed in order to pass the test. And we're seeing a change in the way that the National Registry is doing psychomotor testing. So at the paramedic level, we've now seen an out of hospital scenario, and a realistic out of hospital scenario in which they have to actually perform the skills. So each state has the ability to implement that at the EMT level. That's not a registry decision. So There's states slowly implementing those changes at the EMT level, and it's something that we'll see here on a regular basis. If you are teaching paramedics, the other funny thing, and not so funny thing about this, is that in order to get them used to this kind of education, you would think that we would start the out-of-hospital scenario training at the EMT level so that we wouldn't have to re-teach that or redefine it when they get to paramedic school. I also want to show you this. This is one after another paper on problem-based learning, case-based learning, that we have entire medical schools who are teaching based on this concept. And in problem-based learning, the focus is on a case, a patient, which I hope is what we're all of us focused on when we're actually working on the street. We're no longer focused on a disease, and chapter by chapter, we're not focusing on the disease, but rather on a problem that the student needs to solve. And so it's an active moment. Problem solving, by definition, is what we need to do. So it is the definition of what we do, and each and every day we solve small problems or big problems, but teaching students to make those decisions is actually pretty critical. I also want to share that sometimes we try and create what Henry David Thoreau said was a straight cut ditch out of a free meandering brook. In other words, if it's a goal-oriented, let's take care of the patient, does it really matter how you climb to the top of that challenge? There's roads that are a little bit harder, there's roads that are a little bit easier, but the focus is on outcome-based, evidence-based practice, not necessarily on some of the repetitive steps that may or may not matter in this particular case. And what do I mean by that? There's so many times that we're asking students to memorize lists and then just regurgitate things in order, and we miss the forest for the trees. I was on an ambulance call recently with a patient or a student who was he was doing an interview for a patient who was suicidal, and the patient said, I want to kill myself. And the student said, "Do you have any allergies?" Okay. The patient replied, "Yeah, I'm allergic to lead. I'm allergic to guns." And the student said, "Do you take any medications?" And the guy looks at him and says, "Why? You want me to overdose on something? I want to kill myself." And then the student says, "Do you have any past history?" And they are proceeding down the sample OPQRST algorithm of this is the way I ask questions, and unable to react to the environment that they're presently in, which is dangerous and has somebody who's really emotionally distraught, but they're not interacting with it because they're just going through the steps that they were taught to go through. So problem solving is also about teamwork, and this has been a huge problem in our educational process. We test students one by one. The new out-of-hospital scenario in the National Registry has 2 people in the station. I hope we'll get to the point where we are actually testing the way we were piloting it a few years ago, in which both members are being tested, the team member and the team leader, because I think that's critical. I think the team members are a huge part of how a team functions properly. The team leader needs to listen to their team members, and the team members need to identify problems and suggest solutions. So the flipped classroom concept is a matter of teamwork. I'm going to suggest that you split up your class into teams. Each team should have a team leader, a scribe, a QI officer. These roles should be clearly defined so each one of them knows what their job is, and even include a morale officer. And this is a huge idea that has, I think, blossomed through the work of the NAMSE project and Dr. Chris Nolet. There's a concept of sort of that pit crew CPR, if you will, only that each person has a job to do, and it's about team cohesion and how the team works together. So let's just focus just on what is the flipped classroom for a minute, and we're going to bring in a concept here of asking questions as being part of the flipping of the classroom. So as a teaching strategy, there's been quite a bit of work done on this, but we know from experience the Socratic method worked back when Socrates was around, and it was quite effective. So I'm doing a session at NAMSE for our colleague Bill, who couldn't be there, but the idea is this concept of testing is not a four-letter word. Test is not a four-letter word. The use of questions and interactivity actually creates whole lot of critical thinking, communication, and prioritization. What should you say first? What should you say second? What is important? What should you do first? So teaching by way of questioning is actually quite effective, and we've known this. We also, I think, in the flipped classroom want to create an atmosphere of earning the right to be in class, not just thinking that it's just your God-given right to arrive to class. You've paid tuition, so you should just be able to sit there and do nothing. Instead, we need to create a culture in which you earn your ticket to come to class. And the way you earn that ticket is by doing the work that you're required to do before you arrive to class, that preparation, if you will. This is actually mirroring what we want them to do in the field of ambulance work. They need to be prepared to arrive to their shift. They can't just arrive and think, oh, well, once I get there, I'll start learning the protocols, or once I get there, I'll actually, check my ambulance. At the strike of the hour when you become available, you need to be available for a call. And so the concept of preparation, getting your equipment ready and saying, okay, now we're in service, is one that needs to be permeating a classroom that's preparing professionals for an industry in which we don't have a lot of wiggle room. We can't just say, well, we weren't prepared for that one. Sorry, I guess call us back when we're ready. So coming to class prepared is actually key. And this earning the ticket to class can actually be a coupon. Literally, when they complete their online work, they should print the results of their work and bring that to class as evidence that they can sit in class. And if they haven't done their pre-course quiz, so a quiz that I'm going to suggest that you do online before they arrive, then they can't arrive. In the case in 2008, when we weren't using quizzes online, we had the students fill out the workbook. And so when they arrived, they had to put their stuff down at the table they were sitting. So they're split into teams. Each team has a table, and they open their workbooks, and just as a matter of practice, just had the workbook open to the pages that were required to be done for that day, so that an instructor could walk around and double check and say, yep, you're here. And arriving to class meant arriving not on time, but rather on time, meaning 15 minutes early with your workbook open, discussing the questions in the workbook that didn't make any sense or that you couldn't find the answer to. Incidentally, the first day of class, we ripped out the answers to the workbook. So they put them in a folder with their name on them. They're handed to them at the end of class. But the idea is for them to do some searching. So lots of sources of information, like we discussed before. And we're able to say, look, just if you don't know it, then work with your team. And if your team can't come up with a correct answer, that's when you bring in the instructor or bring in other resources. So try and figure this out. That's your ticket to class. And I'm going to show you a couple of other activities, not just the workbook, but the workbook is sort of an easy, ready-made, already in the can kind of process that you can just say workbooks required for every chapter assigned. All right, let's listen to this.
Hi, I'm Alex for Teach Like This, and this is a flipped classroom. No, really, this is a flipped classroom. And so is this. And this too. There's not one iconic flipped classroom. There's a variety of ways to do it, and it's up to you to make it work. But all flipped classrooms have these two things in common. First, the flipped classroom requires students to do what they normally did in the classroom at home. Secondly, it allows them to control the pace at which they learn information. In the traditional classroom model, students come to a place where there's a lecturer, the lecturer lectures and students take notes, then the students go home to try to do the problems that they're assigned. If the students have problems in the application side of their knowledge, there's nobody there to help them out. In the flipped classroom model, the lecturer records himself giving the lecture and assigns that for homework. Following day, students come to the classroom where they apply their knowledge, and if there's any interventions that the teacher needs to do, the teacher can help and assist however the students need. After the teacher has helped the majority of students, can assign the work for the day, and then target individual learners that need additional assistance. This one-on-one attention that the teacher can now provide is much more effective for struggling learners. Additionally, bright students or students that are absent a lot can work at a different pace. Bright students can work faster than they need to, and students that are absent a lot can catch up quicker. The flipped classroom model allows the learners to control the pace of the lectures. They can pause, rewind, or fast forward however they feel they need. That empowers the students and differentiates learning for a variety of students. To paraphrase one of my favorite quotes about a teacher that flipped his classroom, I used to focus on the brightest kids because I wanted the lecture to go well and they were getting it. But now I focus on the students that need me the most. Some teachers have even taken the flipped classroom to the ultimate level and developed individualized curriculum for students. They have to watch this amount of lectures and perform this task, and when they're done with this task, they move on to the next set of lectures. This kind of pacing guarantees mastery in a unit. However, on the downside, where does that student make up that additional learning that they're required to have? One solution might be after-school learning or finishing up during summer school. Whatever the case, the lectures are available to them. Additionally, when parents hear that their student is required to listen to lectures online, they might initially think that their teacher is lazy. Another possible hurdle for this strategy is internet access. If the student doesn't have internet access at home, they need to find another way in order to get to those lessons. Obviously, these hurdles can be overcome with patience, creativity, and education. If you want to use this strategy, the data is on your side. That's all for this video. If you have additional questions, you can connect with me on Twitter, by email, or by commenting down below. And subscribe for weekly strategies in your newsfeed. I'm Alex, and that's Teach Like This. So you see how they're in the same family.
What if you took the traditional school day and flipped it on its head? Not literally, of course, but having lessons offered at night at home and homework done by day in the classroom. That's the experiment underway at Clintondale High School, just outside Detroit, an area still reeling from the economic and social ills of the nearby city. The school serves many low-income families and faces tight budgets and declining enrollment.
So what's the number part that I'm going to need for all three?
Just 3 years ago, almost half of Clintondale's ninth graders were failing math, science, and English. And overall school performance was ranked in the lowest 5% in Michigan.
Is that the one you want me to go with?
Yeah.
Principal Greg Green decided to take a risk.
Frankly, we weren't doing very well. And so, we had to make a change. I mean, we were desperate for change.
His aha moment came while coaching his 11-year-old son's baseball team. Having learned to record and post instructional videos for his players to watch outside of practice, he was struck by how much time was then left to focus on individual players on the field. He saw the educational potential starting with the power of videos.
Kids can go back and watch them as many times as they want. And in me as an instructor or expert, I don't have to redo that all the time, and I can spend my time with the students in class and actually assisting them. And so if I could do that with 11-year-olds, imagine what we could do with 15 or 16-year-olds doing math.
Green went all in, flipping the entire school, urging his staff to rethink the use of technology and how it complements traditional teaching, and getting local businesses to help fund the effort.
So the legislative branch makes the laws.
Now lectures are recorded and posted online,
The American Civil War lasted from 1861 to 1865.
or teachers can assign outside videos from the popular Khan Academy and TED Talks.
Pretty small, yeah.
Students watch these videos as homework outside of class.
Why do you say it's plutonium?
In class, students now do what was once considered homework, assignments designed to test learning comprehension. Clintondale teachers say this allows more time for one-on-one help and often encourages students to collaborate in problem solving. But English teacher Rob Damron said it took some convincing.
When we first did this, it was funny to look around that staff meeting and look at a lot of staff members, you know, especially the ones that have been here 25, 30 years and saying, what are you talking about? What's a blog? You know, what's a Google group?
Apostrophes makes a noun show ownership or possession.
For teaching for 20 years, I know what lessons kids are going to have a problem with. But I think with doing this flipped approach, there's problems I didn't even know existed. So you really can't hide back there in the corner and say, yeah, I got it. You know, and then the teacher sees later on, well, no, you really didn't get it.
One problem the school faced head on, students who can't afford or don't have access to technology outside of class. They're given extra time in the school's media lab.
Segregation before 1954.
Taking the technology-driven approach further, some lesson plans are now tailored to have students use the latest trends in social media.
Thanks to the 19th Amendment, us women have the right to vote. We deserve to vote. We deserve to vote.
Like this project that required constitutional amendments to be summed up in 6 seconds for the popular website Vine. Green says that taken all together, after 3 years, the flip is paying off.
Our ACT gains have shown, doubling the national average as far as ACT gains. State testing, we've had some mixed results on that. And we've also seen an increase in graduation rates to almost 90%, and college acceptance rates at 80%.
Senior Darrell Wallace Jr. is one example. His grades have risen from a 2.5 GPA as a freshman to 3.5 as a senior. And he says the flip has played a big role. He now watches videos on his cell phone while taking the bus home into a rough section of Detroit, where he lives with his mother and 4 sisters.
I really looked at the videos more because I knew I might not have as much time at home because my sisters are in college and they need the computer, so I'm like, I can do it on my phone. And the bus ride is like 30 minutes, so I probably can get like half of my assignment done.
Darrell's mother, Sabrina Young, also likes the flipped model, saying there's only so much she can do to help with traditional homework.
Especially algebra. So him doing it at school is a plus for him and as well as me, because I just didn't remember the majority of it.
The popularity of online learning has surged in recent years, and flipped classrooms have started popping up everywhere, from elementary schools to some of the nation's top universities. Clintondale is the first U.S. high school to do a total flip. Harvard's Justin Reich has been studying the trend and says he's cautiously optimistic.
What is exciting to me about the flipped classroom is that it gets teachers asking 2 really important fundamental questions. What are the best ways for me to use my time, especially the very precious time I have in classrooms with my students? And then what are the kinds of direct instruction that I could provide that could be digitized so that people could watch it again?
You'll notice that the last set of notes I gave you were for week 5.
But Reich says that flipping alone isn't enough. As with any lesson plan, it all depends on exactly what's being offered.
If what we see from the flipped classroom is that we take bad lectures and uninteresting worksheet problems that characterize a lot of the experience that students have in schools, and we simply flip the order of those 2 things, the odds that we see significant improvement in our schools is pretty low.
And so now we're going to be taking the derivative with respect to T.
Meanwhile, some individual teachers are experimenting with the flipped classroom on their own. 3 years ago, Stacy Roshan flipped her upper-level math classroom at the private Bullis High School outside of Washington, D.C., where students pay up to $35,000 a year in tuition.
What's the derivative of pi r squared h?
She says it's been working for her, but that it might not be for everyone.
I think what's the most important thing is that you really think through what your problem is. I wouldn't say that because everybody's doing the flipped classroom, it's cool, you should do the flipped classroom too. My problem was really time, anxiety, and perhaps if I went to another school, I would do things completely differently.
One added surprise for Roshan in structuring her class this way is what she learned about the reach of her online lessons.
I get thank you letters from students all the time, not even just from the US, but overseas too, and that part always amazes me.
Back at Clintondale, Principal Greg Green's big experiment is getting a lot of attention. More than 200 educators from around the world have visited the school, trying to draw lessons from the flipped classroom.
So I think those are helpful videos to just sort of frame what at least the high school educators are involved with and how they've managed to do that. I'm going to show you ways in which maybe lecture, you could record yourself doing lecture. That's definitely part of it. Some of the information that we deliver is really unique to our medium. Sometimes when we record ourselves, we go, oh my goodness, it would have been better to just watch this other lecture or this other YouTube resource. So the idea was with at least the Flipped Classroom project that I've been involved with UCLA is to harvest the best of the best and try to, if you will, crowdsource or work collaboratively with other schools so that we weren't all of us just reinventing the wheel, but rather finding experts in each area and pooling our resources to get there a little bit quicker. So I would suggest reading this book. This is a really fun book. It actually helps sort of cement all of the different evidence that this out there. It's Karen Hessler, Dr. Hessler put this together and has many resources listed as well as the evidence behind the flipping concept. So flipping the nursing classroom where active learning meets technology. So a few other places where you might find information is the flippedlearning.org site, and obviously they have some nice statistics about learners who felt that this was a positive environment, constant interaction, and students work at their own pace. They can access course material and demonstrate what they're learning. So lots of great information just particularly from that. I'm not at liberty to present here today the results of a recent EMS research project in which 10 schools flipped their EMT classroom because it's about to be presented at the NAMSE symposium as part of the Pre-Hospital Care Research Forum. But this positive feeling wasn't just feeling. It actually had some positive results in their scores. So I encourage people to go to the symposium and see what the results were from that research project. And I hope it gets written up in a full article so that people can see the benefit of it. So I do feel like we're speaking not from just personal experience, which I think is important too, but there's evidence behind not only students liking it, but the results being positive. So I'm going to give some examples of how to do this in an EMT classroom, and now this will be a lot more specific to maybe how you might implement it in your own classroom. One is the concept of building some models. So we would ask the student to find any and everything available to them in their home environment. And in this particular case, we had this was in the OB module that we first piloted with our group of schools. We had them build a pelvis and a birthing model. And so the idea was for them to display different types of successful or unsuccessful births or types of births. So here's breech, and you can see the student just took some cardboard from some cardboard boxes and took a pillow and made a breech birth with sort of the butt looking like it's coming out first. And here's somebody who went to, I think it was Michael's or whatever local fabric store, and got some fabric and some foam and put a baby in there. And so then there's the cervix, and we have a placenta previa here, and they've drawn it in sort of a way that they can hold it. Here's another type of example. This is a prolapsed cord example, and just again, if you will, it's the concept of being MacGyver and grabbing any and all resources that you have available to create your situation. we had students that were lazy, so that happens, and I think it's possibly a good thing to make sure that the grading structure is in place so that you can appropriately reward people who were working very hard, and then others that might have gotten the concept. So obviously this is a concept, and the backpack and the teddy bear do represent birth in some way. So you got to give the creativity to the person, but maybe not the effort that went into it. Here's a much more complex example from Howard County Fire. So those previous ones were from Alaska and Florida and UCLA. And this one, Howard County Fire had them build life-size models of the bad bugs that can kill you. So one's HIV, the other one here is lice, I believe. The concept is sculptures that represent these chemical structures that are, bad bugs that are harmful to you. Again, in order to represent how these things are really evil and can hurt you, but even though they're microscopic. I like doing this. This is fun for me to do. Usually we hit cardiology right around Valentine's Day if that class is doing it. And so this is an edible heart. So they have to make an anatomically correct heart out of different types of food. And some people go all out and bake cookies or even a cake. The one in the center is a fruit roll-up they're different colored roll-ups, and they just cut them. This has vegetables in it, but then you've got the Twizzlers as part of it. So you want to try and encourage them to to be creative, but be accurate. Another example that permeates the entire class, I actually have them do this repeatedly. And in Orlando, Felix Marquez actually made a modification to this. So it starts with laying down on a long piece of paper, butcher block paper. They trace their body and then have to draw in the bones. And so in class, all we do is just give them the paper and have them trace their body because their partner traces the body. And then they take this big thing home and make their skeletons. After they make them, we have them cut out their skeletons and we have a skeleton race. So one suggestion I have on that is that that the best of the best, because I usually give out some Snickers or some sort of a treat that says, wow, you guys did great, or whoever puts up their skeleton the fastest gets a treat. And their skeletons are in their book bag, they're all fairly compact, with some masking tape so that they can quickly put them up, or else you can use Velcro if you want to get fancy. But once you have a few that are really good, and some of these students are really amazing, you keep them with the same number of bones so that they're not racing with their own skeleton. They're racing with a skeleton that the class provided from previous ones. And you can laminate them, make them a little more robust, have them magnetized so that they can quickly put them up. So obviously you can do this with all sorts of anatomy lessons, and it's kind of hands-on instead of it being a concept where you have to memorize all these bones or look at a picture. The coloring book is a great idea, but what if the coloring book was on your partner and you actually have to draw the size of the organ? This is using saran wrap to cover somebody's abdomen, and then the students are trying to sort out what sizes and where exactly are the abdominal organs. We've also used Play-Doh for that, so they can, in class, have to make the organs and put them where they're supposed to be. So they had to have studied that beforehand and kind of come prepared for it. Or again, you can do a puzzle that they have to put together, or a race. So making the activity in class fun is sort of the point of that, but it is activity. It's an active learning kind of classroom. I do want to talk a little bit about some of the things that will happen in class, and that's really mostly scenarios. And so just to kind of spend a little bit of time talking about how badly we've gone, how off the radar, off off the entire chart we've gone when it came to skills and what we need to do to replace them. And I've become kind of a secret shopper. When I go to people's labs, I take pictures of how they're doing skills. And you know, what I mostly see is this. So if you've had a patient hemisect themselves, show you their lungs in a well-lit room at waist height, raise your hand. Because we do this all the time, and then we're complaining that students can't ventilate or perform these skills on the floor or in real situations. Medical directors are upset that, you know, people get esophageally intubated. We're upset that they get esophageally intubated. But in the meantime, we've provided a situation where they never had to check with a stethoscope. They just looked at the chest. Imagine if we just covered up the lungs and put the mannequin on the floor. Just those two things. That doesn't cost any more money. It just sets up the dynamic that you're doing the skill in the context in which you're applying it, not having to learn it in one context and applying it in another. The other thing is that I'm sure everybody carries around a table and their equipment just like it is laid out right here, and that on a call you just lay it all out. So you know, this unrealistic, it's all there for you like this, it means that people don't want to check their bags, don't really think their bags are important, don't think the layout of the bag is important, and little by little we have a system problem where we simply don't, you know, arrive prepared or don't find the equipment when we need it. This was a workshop we did in which we couldn't move the mannequin, and so I just took the picture because I thought, yeah, all of my patients present in a gown, in a bed, with their IV already started for them. So this is exactly how people should learn how to take care of patients in the field. And it was a very fancy simulation center. You can see multi-millions of dollars spent preparing for this hospital-based environment, but it's not the environment that we work in. Here, they didn't have enough money to do the multi-million dollar simulation center, but they did have old desks. So now the mannequins are on a desk, which, you know, just boggles my mind. At least they've put realistic clothing on them. It just feels like we go out of our way to try and get them off the ground. Maybe they don't want them dirty, somehow just making it less and less realistic. They did have a simulator, but it was piled in with SCBA equipment, and there was a aircraft engine next to it, which is part of their sister program next door. So you couldn't really actually load any patients into your own simulator. Here, again, we have a beautiful setup, lots of equipment, very well organized so that everybody has a station to work in. But again, we've got very little realism and mannequins that are, in this case, bolted up against the wall so that they won't slip. You know, when you're trying to intubate Fred the head, he just moves. So you might as well put him bolted against a wall or on a cart that has wheels and can lock. And you know, the cart is such a clever way of kind of storing all your equipment and moving it from room to room, but then at the same time students are always intubating at chest height, which is great for the OR, but maybe not really what happens in the field. And they don't just do it with airway. I just happen to focus on airway, but you can think of any number of other skills where suddenly we're starting an IV at chest height instead of, or table height instead of actually on the floor. Here, we didn't have a full mannequin, so we used Fred the head, an arm, an Annie, and some the display for the paramedic pants to kind of make it so that people could have a full body. Sort of gets us stuck a little bit when it comes to, well, is this realistic? We could at least cover the lungs and make it somewhat better. So really we want to stop that and try and really train like we're going to fight. Really just try and simulate battlefield conditions. I think our brains, we know this from brain-based learning, make synaptic connections whenever we have a new learning path, and these neurochemical channels are formed. So this is part of memory. So when we practice something incorrectly or in a way that's just not realistic, our bodies remember what we practiced, and it's the results are terrible. So Obviously, imitation is sort of, if you want to think of Bloom's taxonomy for skill development, we start with imitation, then we go with manipulation, then precision, then articulation, eventually reaching naturalization. And one of the concepts that I'd like for you to think about is how much of this could be done at home. So is imitation, is watching something like doing an assessment, could you imitate that like you do an aerobics class and follow the leader, follow the aerobics instructor and go, okay, this is where I put my hands, this is kind of how to do it. Maybe even videotape yourself so that you can make mistakes, have your peers review it, and then when you're coming to class, you've already been exposed to a video of the skill being done right, to the steps that are being done. You've tried to do the skill steps yourself, and then you're really ready to practice, and you're not starting this process in class, which takes a long time and is fraught with errors. If you think you're perfect at demonstrating skills, just film yourself and then have people look at it, because it doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen well, and you have to keep redoing it until you get it right. So why not start with something that is fairly well done? So that's part of our UCLA project, is to pool our resources and get really good videos so that our students can see those in one way, and then they can mimic or practice those in that manner. Obviously, we want to get to a naturalization and articulation phase where they're just able to do it without even thinking about it. But I think sometimes educators just need to be happy with precision. We may not get to naturalization. So I highly recommend starting skills right where in the environment that they're actually going to do it in. Don't cut any corners. Try and really have them do all the steps with the right equipment. Prep at home, as we discussed. So I learned this from New Zealand. They were doing quite a bit of work around this. They have the students watch a video. In this case, the videos are already in the ebooks. So it comes with a digital package in most textbooks that you buy, and you can click on the video to watch the skill. So I think instructors probably need to read the book too, because sometimes we don't look. I'm guilty of this. I don't know what's in the book. I don't know what digital resources are there. I'm too busy preparing my lecture. So you can see where it just goes wrong, and worse, even more wronger, every time we try and, we're not aware of what resources the students have. So by the way, all the ebooks have audiobooks. So in the video we saw earlier, when the student is commuting back and forth, that's the time to be listening to the audiobook and getting an opportunity to at least hear the spoken words. If you don't read very fast, which, by the way, I don't, I can actually go faster by having somebody else read the textbook and thinking about it, and then doing the workbook activity to fill in my knowledge. So, excuse me. So the skill drills here and the video of how to place a pulse oximeter seem like a very simple assignment and something that can be done without much fuss. I would say primary survey, secondary survey, all of those skills are things that we can do at home. Even practicing with just maybe someday we'll get to the point where they take a mannequin home and have it at home, but let's just assume that they use a pillow for the head and another pillow for the chest, and just practice the motions they need to have so that they arrive to class prepared. And I think pantomime and mimicking, motor learning, they'll remember the action, the muscles will remember the action more than their brain will remember, how to do something, but then never actually get the hands on to do it. So we know from aviation that checklists are super important. Crew resource management is an absolute key. It's being tested in the new out-of-hospital scenario as part of the National Registry. So crew resource management's here to stay. So key words are part of CRM. Understanding the checklist and having the checklist, letting students actually see the checklist, but mimicking, monitoring the exposure, and doing the demonstration at home might actually work. Um, uh, Again, just an example, if you don't get it from the textbook, the PHTLS materials have some nice sort of this is how to do it, and opening the airway. You can use either one or both. In the scenario phase in class, this is kind of part of a homework assignment. Imagine these to be your teams, and so you'll have a team that's team one. They're going to give a scenario, so you have to plan a scenario to bring to class. That's part of their homework. So we're not going to create all the scenarios. The students are creating scenarios, and this is kind of a key ingredient to the UCLA flipped classroom, is that the students are actively thinking about the patient's symptoms and signs and whether the disease process fits with the injury or the illness that they're representing. They have to bring realistic props, and so we create boxes of props that are available at the school, but each one of the teams has to bring in their own, and hopefully even bring in family members to be patients, so that the family member, byproduct of this is the family member gets to learn about the profession, and they get to learn how important it is to let their family know what kind of work they're doing. But many times they have access to, aunts, grandparents, uncles, sisters, brothers who have medical conditions, who are actual diabetics or actually have a hip that's been fractured, and the acting job is much better. The age is appropriate. Kids get to experience what it's like for their parents to be in class or their siblings. So we encourage them to bring people from outside of class to be the patient. Just think of sort of a ready, set, go environment in which when the clock strikes 8 a.m. and they're about to start their skills, they're going to begin their scenarios, and everybody gets into place, and at 8 a.m. the tones go off, the givers dispatch, and the doers, the responders, respond to the event. So the team actually has to be prepared. You can let them know ahead of time what the scenarios are. It's not a secret. We want them to know how to take care of a diabetic. So unlike the real world where we'll never know until the tones go off, here they can have a day of preparation and say, we're covering diabetes tomorrow, so you're going to have scenarios that have to do with diabetes. So chances are they'll probably read the chapter. They don't want to be embarrassed in front of their friends. The people who are giving the scenario, they have to figure out the signs and symptoms. They're reading the chapter, trying to figure out what's going on. And it's all centered around action. So the watchers track and document. That's sort of a critical element to this. We want them to keep track of how many skills they've performed. So this is where, if you're using FISDAP or something similar, you're going to want to make sure that you have goal sets, and that they're putting on the hair traction or putting on a splint or doing primary or secondary surveys in enough iterations so that the skills make sense. So now there's performance standards for them that mimic what they'll experience in paramedic school or in real life, and have to document everything that they do. It's sort of again, train like you're in a fight, simulate battlefield conditions. When you're at work on an ambulance, you document everything you do. It's not optional. You can't just do stuff and not write it down. So tracking what you're doing in the lab during the scenarios is required. And if you don't, then you probably aren't going to be a great EMS provider, and you probably shouldn't pass the class. And you can't just say, well, I did those things, but I didn't write them down, because that's not good healthcare. Somebody else coming along was going to say, well, what was done? So it is kind of time to have that accountability again and say, you must keep track of this. This is how. Last but not least, you've got two more possibilities of groups. So depending on the size of your class, you might have 3 to 5 to 7 people in these groups. So we might have 35 people involved in a scenario all at once. Or if you have small classes with just 10 or 15 people, maybe even 9 people, you might put 3 people in the first 3 groups and skip the last 2. But groups 4 and 5 are usually the lifeline. They've got references pulled out. They've got their protocols. They're the phone a friend, the backup, and the hospital. So Megan Corey in San Francisco has them review last week's tape of their own performance. So they record these, and they can actually review them in a different room. And then they're the receiving hospital, is this reference backup hospital group. And number 5 is an on-deck crew. So if the doers can't get through, the responding crew can't get through the scenario in the first 2 or 3 or 4 times, then the backup crew does it. and they get a chance to go through. And maybe sometimes you actually just want the on-deck crew to get more experience with that particular case. It's a good case, it's a good scenario. You say, okay, give the one team a rest. You guys start. See if you can do the scenario. See if you can handle it any better. What are the differences? And debriefs are very short. I'll talk a little bit about sort of those sorts of concepts of when to stop and when not to. But splitting your class up. Spitting at them is bad. Don't do that. But splitting your class up, you can get them to do. Each one has sort of a job. It's like a pit crew approach to scenario building. So there's tools that I'm happy to share with you that have to do with the job that each person has. So what if you're a giver? What are you doing? What's your job? And those are handed to them at the beginning of class, so that when they go, oh, okay, it's our turn to give the scenario. What do we need to do? We need to get this put together. You can see that it includes getting a smartphone, a tablet, a GoPro, or some sort of device to film and upload the video. Today, if somebody doesn't have a smartphone, somebody else will. So someone in a team will have a phone to be able to record this and upload it to YouTube. But if you have a lab where you can have some iPads or have some support for it, that would be ideal. This is what we use for them to do to put together their scenario. So actually fill it out. So it's not I just thought up the scenario kind of moment. The givers have to turn that in. You can make it an assignment, have them turn it in a day before, a week before, whatever works for you, so that you know the scenario is realistic and it's comprehensive and has everything you need to run the scenario. So once you're in class, this is really about kind of train like you're going to fight. So we want the scenarios to be as realistic as possible. Sometimes they're not even in the classroom. We might stream the video from a FaceTime or Skype or Zoom, or you pick your poison. Facebook actually allows people to vote nowadays for live video, so they can say, oh, I like that. Ooh, that was bad. That should have failed them. And the scenarios are as realistic as possible. The students show up in uniform. It's kind of a work culture. And where we can, we're going to mimic that environment in circumstances that are as realistic in our labs or outdoors or in a bathroom as we possibly can. So where it's not possible, you use the classroom, but there's sort of an escalating level of scenario realism, and the longer they're in class, the more realistic the scenarios become. I do want to remind everybody that we're in a culture of safety, so we need to implement the culture of safety. There's an EMS agenda for the future that includes a culture of safety, and in crew resource management, we depend on checklists. So have the students prepare checklists so that they have memory aids so that they don't forget to do things. This is a student in Detroit who had her drug doses all written down in little cards that are about the size of an index card, or a business card, with a ring on them, and they were in her pocket. She could immediately reference the drug, and because she created them, knew where to look for the information. But there are obviously drug references that are available that people can carry in their pocket, and so if commercially available, Infomed is one that I know I've used for years, and so those are examples of what you can do. Obviously providing context so that there's these scenarios aren't just kind of out of the blue without any relationship to real scenarios is key. Here's a good example. If you look at the ventilation rate of the pediatric patient, they get distracted when they need to move the patient to a stretcher, and they're not paying attention. They're just doing skills just for the sake of doing skills instead of doing them right. So I do want to introduce you to the concept that if a skill is being performed that would hurt a patient, so respiration is too fast, too slow, something that was the issue with the scene, you might use this soccer concept of like yellow card, red card. where a yellow card is a caution because we think there's a problem, and a red card is a full stop and eject from the game, like start over, stop. And this is not the way we practice. Vince Lombardi said, practice makes for permanence. Perfect practice makes for performance, for better performance. So having people just go through the motions improperly, like, oh, I'll do this right when I get to the real call, is just not going to happen. They're learning as they're practicing, and they're learning that respirations aren't really a big deal. So stopping them causes them to go, oh my goodness, okay, well, I hate being stopped. I really don't want to have that happen. And then we're going to really pay attention to the ventilation rates. So there's a whole lot of philosophy around that. It's an immediate feedback kind of piece. I would only suggest that we do it in initial education. When you have continuing ed and you have experienced providers, they're annoyed that they're being stopped. Although, arguably, if they're killing a patient, we should, say, okay, no, let's do this correctly. But at least in initial education, that learning, that motor learning, is so powerful. You want to stop any bad habits. Here's an example of one we did at UCLA. They're in the process of doing a scene. You can see one student in the background is filming. You have a student that's giving, or here they're grading, and the instructor has just intervened because the students exceeded a 10-minute limit. So you can see our booklets, our skill books, have a back cover that actually has a red card on it and a yellow card. They're laminated, and he can say, stop, you've exceeded the 10-minute scene time and you're still on scene, start over, and let's see if we can get this done correctly. And it's a gentle kind of stop. You don't want to humiliate anybody. You want to say constructively, this is what we were after. Good job on this part, but let's do it over, and we start over. Notice how everybody's wearing eye protection, everybody's wearing gloves. If you're part of the scene, you're actually doing this correctly all the way through. So train like you're going to fight. I don't want to get too far into this. This was just kind of a bonus extra, trying to get people in the mode of thinking differently about simulation and simulation centers. Because right now people think we need ER beds and a room for a couch. And I just want to, this is a David Hallowell immersive classroom out of the UK. And we're hopefully going to build one at UCLA. I'd like to see more institutions try this in the US, but it's just a cube. It's just, think of it like a holodeck, but there's 4 projectors, 3 against the walls and 1 towards the floor. And the concept is that you're surrounded by this image of where you are. And when you're transporting, you have the back of your ambulance, and you're transporting en route to the hospital, and you have the sound of a siren if you're transporting emergently. So the room helps kind of set an environment. You're delivering a patient here. There's just background video now with motion of people walking around the ER when you actually deliver the patient. And the walls are interactive. There's a laser pointed at them, so you can actually kind of interact with the information that's or the wall. In our case, we want the wall to, when you touch it on a yellow button, turn yellow and or red if you want to stop the scenario. So so kind of an interesting, cool behavior, as well as being able to pull up debriefing checklists or video of the event that's just occurred. And again, it's 3 projectors, and I think it's really cool the way that he's thinking about this and kind of integrating it. I saw this in the UK too, in terms of simulation, ease of simulation. So taking just movable walls and the kind that you make to just separate a cube, and this is the back of your ambulance. It's a photograph put onto one of these movable walls, and suddenly your students are kind of surrounded in a cube that looks like your ambulance, instead of buying a multi-million-dollar simulator. So we often bring in an extra IV arm because they have to check an IV or start an IV or give a shot. This was out of Fairfax, Virginia. Chris Kroboth put this together in a very nice way. He's got a hard plastic back so nobody's going to get hurt, and some plastic tubing that looks like blood tubing, and an old mannequin part with some Velcro. And so now we can put the IV anywhere. It's nice and thin, easy to make, cheap, and we avoid having to have these big arms, the third arm syndrome, where it's totally fake. So in fact, flipped classrooms really are about hands-on. I'm after 100% success rate first attempt. We have it for the courses that I've been involved with, and have had it for a long period of time. Now, when instructors kind of really want to cling to some of the lecture, and there's less accountability, we start seeing, pass rates in the 94% first attempt, because things slip through the cracks and students don't get a chance to practice. I do think all of the exams, we've been, at least with the schools that are collaborating, using the same final exam so we can see comparatively how people are doing. We mimic, again, battlefield conditions. So if they're going to go to a Pearson VUE Center with a computerized exam, we're going to create a computerized exam experience in which their IDs are checked, and we're double checking to make sure that they're performing in the way that the environment that Pearson VUE is going to require of them. No different than desensitizing a person to driving an ambulance with lights and siren. You have to play the lights and siren enough so that people's heart rate doesn't go up anymore. It's just part of the way we do work. And so part of the way we do testing would be in a computer with questions being displayed on the screen. So I'd encourage you to take a look at the article again in the May EMS World issue, and please don't hesitate to send questions and reach out. I think it's these are cool times to be working on this, because we have a whole lot of people trying to make it work, and a lot of resources, actually. Again, I have a total conflict, so I declare it, but FISDAP and Jones and Bartlett have been amazing to work with, and are putting together the UCLA flipped classroom with us. So there's institutions beta testing this fall, and I'm looking forward to working with you to implement it in your sites. And with that, I'll go ahead and stop talking, because nobody's going to remember this anyway, right? And we'll take questions and kind of go to the next phase.